Hey everyone, it is Katie from Moonflower Moments. So I'm joining y'all today for a part 2 of my tarot collection video. So I did part 1 probably earlier in this year. I think it was probably around March or so. And I've gotten some new decks that have come in since then. And so I wanted to kind of continue this. I do keep my decks written down in order, so I'm able to tell what comes in first and then what comes in next. So I really don't feel like I need to start fresh and show you my entire collection because almost every single deck that I featured in the first one is still with me. I think I've only given away like 2 of them. So I feel like that video is still pretty up to date. So I'm going to join in and I am going to get started with sharing what decks I've bought since then. So I do have one correction. So the Enchanted Blooms Oracle was one of my first decks that I ever bought, and I forgot to include this in my deck collection video, my first one. But I did want to include it here just so that way we have an accurate record. And as far as it goes with the Enchanted Blooms Oracle, I used to use this deck all the time when I first started reading. I think it's really good to have a deck that has keywords like beginnings and love, elegance, pride, some of these words that can help you foster a sense of self-love. And I think when many people are starting out with tarot, that is what they're using tarot for, is for self-exploration. So this was just a really invaluable tool for me to have at the beginning of my journey. So this was Enchanted Blooms. It is an older deck. It's been in my collection for about 3 years, but I wanted to include it here because it did make it in the first video. Okay, so starting off with the ones that I bought in like April or May, I think is where we are picking up. This is the Voyager Tarot. I have a vintage copy. And I bought this from ATV Tarot on Etsy, and she sells a lot of secondhand decks for a really good price. So I was excited to get this deck along with like the larger guidebook that the Voyager Tarot has. I haven't worked with this deck as much as I want to. I did include it on my neglected decks list of 2024, but I do have some plans and how I'm planning on using it in 2025. I did find that it really worked well for me during like Leo season when we were in the height of summer and everything was a little bit discombobulated around me, and I needed a deck to acknowledge that and to like show me that like the cards could be just as kind of confusing and daisy as like the heat around me. And so I like that I'm able to go to a deck for those days when like it's 100 degrees out where I live. So I really appreciate this deck for meeting me in that space. But I think that I can use it at other times of the year too. So we are going to have a little bit of a reintroduction in 2025. I want to read the book of poems that was written about this book from like start to finish, do a little deck study on it. But I know that this deck is here to teach me things, even though I didn't use it very much in 2024. So this was the Voyager's Tarot. Next, I have a deck that's not really an Oracle deck, but I like to use it as an Oracle deck. And this is my 50 Plants That Heal. So these are actually study cards. So we have the name of the plant, the active elements, we have a write-up on them, the benefits, and then the methods of how to ingest for all of these. Even though this doesn't necessarily have any divinatory meanings written on the card itself, a lot of these plants I'm really intimately familiar with. And so when I pull out, oh, I love this example. When I pull out anything with pine trees, I have a deep divinatory understanding that pine trees are related to portals and boundaries. So I'm able to work with this deck in that way. So I don't necessarily need it for all of the cards to have keywords, because especially like this is an oak tree. It has acorns. To me, when I think of oak trees, I think of strength, because we have a lot of tall, very magnificent live oak trees where I live. This is rosemary. I think of protection. So a lot of times I don't need the keywords for the deck to make sense to me. I don't know why stuff is upside down today. I'm sorry, y'all. I never read with reversals. But I do find this to be a very nice deck to use with a lot of my other decks. I have a lot of decks that are Oracle that are just a little bit too bright to match with some of my darker decks. At least aesthetically, you can really match any deck on deck, right? And I appreciate that this is darker, so it matches with a lot of those darker themes. and darker decks. So that was my 50 plants that heal. All right, next is one of my full stop confessions. This is the Funny Little Lizards Tarot. I don't get to see him very often on YouTube, but I absolutely adore this little guy. So I bought this deck because I really, honest to God, really wanted Desert Illuminations. And it was out of print at the time that I wanted it. And so I bought something that had a similar color palette. And I will definitely say that this deck not only scratched that itch, but taught me so much about tarot. So I really appreciate sitting in my garden and asking the green anoles, which are lizards that live there, you know, what can I learn from you? What kind of lessons can you teach me? And so this deck helped me become more embedded with a particular creature that lives in my yard that has established a home there. And for that, I'm deeply appreciative of that. The guidebook actually explains why the creator picked each and every single lizard, or reptile rather, that was shown, and she easily connects her choice to tarot imagery and tarot knowledge. And so I greatly appreciate that the associations are very clearly explained. This is one of my best nature decks in my collection. So this was the Funny Little Lizards with this gorgeous, lovely siding, and I like the backs too. I just think it's very pretty. It's a very good summer deck. Next is going to be a deck that I show on my channel quite often. So if you've seen any of my other videos, I think you've probably seen this one. This is my Nola Tarot Cats, and it has these backs. The cardstock on this is really luscious. I feel like I talk about that every time I use this deck, but it's just a nice linen cardstock. It just feels good on the hands. So I grew up close to New Orleans. I'm from Louisiana. I grew up close to New Orleans. And so I appreciate to see my home state reflected in these cards. I'm a massive cat lover. I feel like I don't ever mention that when I talk about this deck, but like I feel like cats and the way that they interact with the world was one of my first languages that I learned, right? Like I think I learned the language of cats alongside learning that language of humans, because we always had so many cats at my house, and this little boy right here looks just like my little kitten. And so it brings joy to me when I flip through and I also see cats that remind me of my other cats. And so sometimes I'm able to bring that in. Like this cat reminds me of my cat Rosemary, who passed away when I was younger, and she was just really sweet. So I could bring that into this interpretation by saying that she's sweet and she really doesn't want to fight, but she has to fight. And so there's another layer that can be added too that makes this deck deeply personal for me to use when I think of it from the lens of this cat is showing up for a reason because I've had a cat like that, things like that. So that's a little bit of a woo way that I use it, but I think it's really gorgeous. I think it's funky. I think it's weird. I awarded it my most mysterious deck of 2024, and I think it definitely rightfully earned that honor. So it's so sweet. I love this deck. It's indie, but I think it's pretty affordable if you live in the United States. So I think it's worth giving a shot to if you're interested in decks like that. It's very funky. All right, next we're getting into some of the decks that I got in July for my birthday. So my husband knew that I had been waiting for Dream Enchantress for a while, and I have edged these sides. Sorry, I'll try to let you know when I've done that. He knew that I had this on my wish list for a very long time. I think this was the deck that sat on my wish list for the longest time. And I took it off my wish list, and I could not remember the name of it because Dream Enchantress is not a deck that shows up on TarotTube really often at all. And so I spent like 6 months just looking, and I remember that it was a Los Scarabeo deck. So I went to Llewellyn, I went to Los Scarabeo, I like looked through literally all of their decks to try to find this one, and I could not find it. And then one day I think I was just searching online, and I found it again, and it felt like it was time for it to come home to me because I knew that I was interested in it. I put it on my wish list. I said, no, I feel like I have other decks like this. I don't need this deck. I took it off my wish list. Then I couldn't find it. And then when I found it, it was time for it to come back home to me. So this is one of my top decks of 2024, which of course I'm talking about because we're just getting into 2025. So my mind is definitely thinking about that and kind of in that scheme. But it's one of my top tarot decks of all time. I love this deck. It's a little bit weird. It has a lot of water, but it also has a lot of air, which definitely matches a massive part of who I am as a person. And I greatly appreciate that this imagery is not like our traditional imagery. I feel like there's always something that I can learn from this deck, and the guidebook is really thematic in nature. It might only have 1 to 2 sentences, but those 1 to 2 sentences are really strong and offer a beautiful culmination to any writing or any reading. So love it. And I love how whimsical this is. It's sweet. It's a sweet deck. So this was Dream Enchantress. I did edge it, and I love that deck. Another deck that my husband bought me in July for my birthday was Under the Oak Tarot. I think for me, I mentioned like who's bought me decks because that's part of their story. And so it just makes this deck innately very special that someone that I love very dearly like purchased it for me. So I think that this deck and I instantly got off to a good place. And I love its like super moody color palette. So you're gonna see that I was really vibing this moody color palette at the beginning, or rather in the middle of 2024. So I brought in a lot of decks that are rich with like these jewel tones. I really love decks that have jewel tones. But essentially this deck follows a girl who is blind through this imaginary adventure, and she meets all kinds of creatures and comes across all different types of new things. And it's a deck that's weird. It's a deck that's not necessarily the easiest to work with, but I use this deck alongside reading the book Finding the Fool. And I found that to be a really beautiful venture, because using that book as like a study tool to help me understand this deck, it slowed me down and got me to look at some of the more unconventional attributes of this deck and really try to listen to its unique point of view. This is one of my favorite cards for the Five of Cups. Like I can really feel that desperation and loss in her. So Under the Oak. I did feature this in my top 2024 pairings, and it was featured with Tarot Landscapes because this deck and that deck are basically a bonded pair. So if you're interested to see how I use this deck in practice, you can go check that link below, and that'll show you how I match this deck with another. So Under the Oak Tarot, which I love also because I have a lot of oak trees in my yard, so I love hearing Under the Oak. It makes me feel warm and fuzzy. Next one was a bit of a splurge, but a happy splurge. This is the Influence of Angels Tarot. I am really, really happy that I bought this deck. The guidebook for this deck is just really tremendously well written. So essentially the guidebook, all of the court cards are like reimagined after real characters and real people, real historical figures, and the guidebook goes through who these individuals were and how they relate to tarot. So it's not only a nod to the angels throughout, because this is called the Influence of Angels, so all of the cards have angels in them, but it also references historical figures, and there's something about that that makes my Virgo rising very happy. I love a good deck that you can go deeper with and there's multiple layers to it, and I think that that is the perfect depiction of this. However, in the same time, this deck is really easy to read if you just like want to throw down some cards. It's a very easy reader. You can get messages from it even without checking out the guidebook. So I like the perfect balance that this deck creates. You can go deeper if you want, but at the same time, you really can just pull some cards and get a really clear reading from that. I use this one a lot with clients. Clients really like this deck. I think because the imagery is like non-confrontational, like there's this sweetness to the Page of Swords. So it's just been a steady and consistent friend in 2024. I didn't use it as much as I want, but I did use it a fair bit. So I think this one's going to see more of its time shining in 2025. Okay, that was Influence of Angels. Here are the backs for those. The only thing I don't like about it is the backs, because I don't like navy blue, but that's a me thing. I think the backs probably look otherwise good to everyone else. I have Faceted Garden Oracle next. I have talked about this one all the time. Here are the backs of this one. They have this nice, like, gorgeous edging. Catches the light really well. I talk about this one all the time because this is one of my favorite decks of all time ever. Sorry, I just saw another card from a different deck that was mixed in with this. That happens sometimes. So Faceted Garden is just an incredible reader for me. It's an incredible reader, period. I love this deck. I think if you're on the fence about this deck, I don't want to influence anyone, but this was one of my best buys of 2024. Absolutely. Sorry, I keep referencing it in terms of the calendar year. I think it's because I'm filming this literally on like New Year's Eve that I'm thinking in terms of like New Year's. But I love to use this deck in practice with deepening my relationship with my garden. I think I'm more of a garden girl than I am a forest girl. Like, I do like the forest. I like to take a nice hike in the forest, but the garden is the language that I primarily speak. And so, like I had said earlier, that the language of cats was one of the first languages that I learned. I think the language of the soil and the dirt. My father had a very large garden when I was growing up. Like, we lived on 2.5 acres, but I swear to you, like, an acre and a half of it was just like his garden, and it was all vegetable garden. So from a very young age, I grew up with my hands in my soil. And like, I learned to look for plants to see if they were sick, and I learned to harvest from them. And I always just had like fresh produce. And so this deck takes me back there, and it reminds me that the garden was one of the first languages that I learned too. So I have infinite love for it. We have a very deep and like bonded relationship. This is by far one of my favorite decks in my collection. And just such a damn good buy. I appreciate this deck so much. And this is the only deck I have by Clear Mac. I do want to get the, is it Illuminated Earth? It's the geology one that she has, the other oracle that she has. And I think that I might try to buy that in 2025. I'm a little bit on the fence about it because I love this one so much, but I feel like if I love this and then the other deck is good too, then it's like 2 times the love. Makes sense in my mind. Alrighty, another birthday deck. This was the 3rd one from my husband. I was trying to remember. I was like, I felt like I had 3. I think he made me wait to receive this one, which is why it's later on the list. He made me wait till my actual birthday, whereas the other ones he gave to me right when they came in. So anyway, that's a distinction, I guess, that probably only I would remember. Alrighty, so this is the Mystic Fairies, and we have this on the back. I did edge it, by the way. So this is edged by me. I like a nice orange color. And this was another deck that I used incessantly when I got it in the garden. I used to read for the little microorganisms that were in the garden. So if I saw a mushroom that was particularly interesting, I would sit down with this deck and I would pull cards and say, you know, what can I learn from this particular mushroom about interconnectedness, or relying and sharing resources, because essentially mycelium webs will share resources with each other. And I got some very profound readings from this. So I use this almost as kind of a spiritual enhancement to my nature and my understanding of nature. And I really want to do a video when summer starts on that. So if y'all are interested in seeing that in practice, I can probably bring my camera outside and maybe do like a face front video. Oh my goodness, I know I never do those, but I'm not against them. Most of the time I just don't want to put on like, I don't want to like look presentable. Like, I like YouTube because you can film in your PJs. So that being said, I think I do want to take this deck out, maybe do like a front facing video and show you exactly how I read for the organisms around me using this deck in particular. So that's on my filming list. If you're interested, let me know. But I think that this deck is better talked about and shown about in practice. Because, you know, on the surface level, you could be like, oh, it's just kind of like another like RWS. Nah, it's really not. Like, this deck, because the creatures and like the fairies and the figures are so small, it really makes you sit back and consider your perspective as a human and how your understanding of the world has been altered just by the sheer size and like might that humans have. And it teaches you to be more considerate and gentle to those that are a little smaller than you. Alrighty. So this would be my Mystic Fairies. I can't wait to bring her out. I haven't used her in a really long time. This video is getting me nostalgic for summer because I'm showing all the decks that I bought during the summer at this time. All right, another crowd favorite, another my favorite. If you've been on my channel, you know that I love this deck and I use it all the time in practice. And this is the Little Bird Tarot by Shanna D. And guys, I do apologize for the light, but like I definitely suffer from the winter blues. So anytime the window's open and I get a little bit of a light, like I can't close it. I know it would probably be better for filming, but we're just gonna roll with it like this. I kind of think a nice dappled light kind of adds to the coziness of it. So if it's driving you crazy, I'm sorry, I need it for me. So that was my little tangent. So Little Bird is one of my favorite decks in my collection. I awarded this the best nature deck of 2024 for me. And as you can tell from all of the other nature decks that I've shown, that is such a massive thing for me because I am such a fan of nature decks in general. I think that Shanna did a great job researching and compiling these images. They're all Audubon's images, and then she compiled them and wrote a guidebook explaining the meaning of the birds and why the birds would match naturally with like the tarot and how the associations are really appropriate. If she can talk to you about the plants that are in the picture, she does, but because it is, you know, the Little Bird Tarot, she mostly talks about the birds. But I think that she like really did a great job like talking about the plants as well. But this is a sweet little deck that reminds me to see the world from a big picture point of view. I also think that this is one of my decks that reminds me of contentment. Like when I'm sitting outside and I'm drinking my coffee and I look up at my crepe myrtle and it's filled with like tiny little birds. That brings me a lot of intense joy and just makes me feel that domestic bliss. So I get that vibe from this deck too because it reminds me of bird watching with my husband. It's just a sweet little deck. So this is the Little Bird Tarot. It has great cardstock too. I know I say that every time it's on here, but I'm a fan of linen. Ooh, next. Okay, I did sit down and try to do like a top 10 favorite decks reset because the video I made in the summer, some of those decks are still the same, but some of them aren't. And I decided against it. I'm gonna wait like another 6 months or so to film that video. But one of the reasons that I wanted to refilm my top 10 decks is because of this deck. This is Wild Radiance. This gets a hell of a lot of airtime on my channel because this is the deck that I go to make me feel strong, to make me feel powerful, to make me feel self-reliant and resilient. This is a deck that like taps into my inner power. I've also always been intensely interested in the desert. I have never visited the desert like ever in my life. Like maybe I've driven through Texas and I've seen like some desertscape, but not true desert. But my soul feels like it belongs there. My friend calls me the sun and I call her the moon because she's very receptive and I'm very like cardinal, like here you go, here's all my energy, similar to the way that the sun is. And I feel like the desert personifies all of that, like the intensity and the extremity of both the sun, but then also the coldness at night. And when I play with this deck, it makes me want to book a trip to the desert. It makes me want to get my feet into the sand and to go to some of these more extreme environments where life has literally been cultivated and has found its resilience. So it's a beautiful deck, but I think for me it speaks on that level too of I've always felt that calling to go even though I never have. And so it's a dream deck to me too. It helps remind me and inspires me to be the truest version of myself. So I'm going to stop there because this strength card absolutely redefined everything that I know about strength. I was reading one day and I looked down at her and it looked like, to me, I was like, oh my God, she must have like a lot of core strength. And then I thought to myself about core values and how our strength can come from our core values. And I thought that that was an interesting mix and how we're willing to do anything to uphold those. I like it. It's a good deck. It's a weird deck. It's a good deck. The guidebook is good on it too. Like, there's some really weird cards. Like, I don't know. Like, let me show you. Like, this Two of Pentacles is really weird. The guidebook does explain it. I don't remember what they said before about it. I just prefer to read it intuitively, and I mean, if it matches the Two of Pentacles and what I know about it, cool. If it doesn't, also cool. This is an intuitive read for me. All right, so this was a popular deck of the summer, and also a repurchase for me in a little bit of a way. So this is the Pocket Archetypes. This is the one that I bought next. So as you can tell, towards the end of the summer, I was really into some of this like massive, bright, colorful colors. I like a big pop of color. I like saturation. I like contrast. I like all of this. And so I had already owned the Archetypes deck, but it was too large for me to use because I have very, very small hands. So I gave it to the person who did my first tarot reading, and I gave it to him. And so now he has my copy of the larger one with the larger guidebook. And I have this tiny little friend that is just an excellent little reader. I love working with it for expansive readings. It works really well for client readings. When you're doing like month aheads or year aheads, pulling something like the Seed can be so profound because there's so much for you to go off of. So it's made cameos in several of my year ahead readings for clients, and I just really like it. So I think the Pocket Archetypes gets the appropriate amount of airtime on TarotTube. It's a good little deck. Next would be one that I'm sure some people argue gets too much airtime on my channel, but I don't care. I like my decks. And so I'm going to show you all the decks I'm using, and this is definitely one of them. So this is Secrets of the Mystic Grove. I saw this first time on West Star Tarot channel, and I bought it before I even finished watching the video. It was one of my most impulsive buys of 2024. I'm not usually that girl. I'm not usually that person. I usually will kind of sit back and wait and think and kind of contemplate, and with this one, I knew it was instant love for me. This deck held my hand. This is a trusted friend. This is a deck that I go to when I need an answer, but I need to sit and ponder. This is a really great deck for journaling because it has 3 keywords. It also has 3 questions or so for every card written in the guidebook with like a little write-up that is just so incredibly spot on. This is what I consider to be my journaling deck, my deep introspective deck. I absolutely adore the fact that we have native imagery here. So these are poppies, and then this is the purple coneflower. Purple coneflower to me really represents healing, and it's also very pokey, right? Like, I don't know if you've ever touched it, but the top part of this is like really pokey. So it might bring to mind to me how you have to go through some parts that really hurt in order to heal. And in doing so, recognize that that's part of like the greater structure of life, that we have to go through the pokey bits to heal because that's part of the rhythms that we follow. And I love that. So it literally doesn't mention anything about any of these creatures really in the guidebook at all. Like this one, it might like mention that there's like a deer and there's like an ostrich and things like that, but it doesn't talk about like these kind of animals that are more decor. But like I see when I read this, like this right here, this is not a monarch. That would actually be a queen butterfly. And queens are really hard to get in your yard, really hard. So if I got a queen in my yard, I would definitely be celebrating. So the guidebook might talk about like her and like this big, I guess, is it a peacock? I have no idea. But it wouldn't talk about these smaller things, but I know what they are. And so every time I go to it, I feel like I'm able to bring so much of my own knowledge to the table. This is a deck, and I think in that way where my intuition soars because the deck itself is so good, but I'm also matching it with my own personal knowledge and my relationship with all of these creatures. Beautiful. And I fucking love the color scale. I had to say the F-bomb at least one time. I fucking love the color scale. It is so beautiful. It's exactly what I want. So I also featured this in my top 2024 pairs with Jupiter King Tarot. So if you want to go check that out, or even look at the cover image has both of them in there, and I think that they match beautifully. All right, next is going to be Sleepy Hollow Tarot. And I think it's a little bit different from my norm because I don't have a lot of decks that are like Halloween-y in nature. And while this isn't exactly a Halloween deck, it does have a hell of a lot of pumpkins and a hell of a lot of fall trees. So it looks Halloween-y to me. My husband grew up in Massachusetts, and I believe that this features, because it matches Sleepy Hollow, which I have never read, but I believe that that's set in New York. And so a lot of what I see in this deck reminds me of visits up to see my husband. The first time that I ever traveled out of the States ever, or rather out of the States, out of my state, Louisiana, I went up north to Massachusetts to see my husband, and it was in fall. And so I just have very fond memories of New England in autumn. It brings me back to like my younger roots. And so I find that this imagery is just really, really just like quite comforting to me and a little bit cozy. But I really did enjoy using it. Next is going to be a deck that I really probably should have included this on my neglected decks video. This is my Conjure Cards. So this is based in Appalachian playing card style divination. I say that, you really can't like say like a whole region, but someone from that area created this deck and said that they created the system based off of what they had learned from their family members. I bought this around Halloween, and I think I used it a couple of times. I was very interested to see how I could work with this on an intuitive level. So less so much about playing card divination and more so looking at the Ace of Hearts and seeing that there's a nest here. So it's almost as if like with the nest, with the eggs, we're full of like new hope and new promises for the future. And like that probably is what the guidebook says, because like what else are you supposed to get from nest, I guess, other than like shelter? But see, now that I'm thinking about it, I can pull like quite a lot of meanings for nest. You think about like the fact that the birds built the structure, and so there's also structure and warmth and home and all of that. So I bought this to develop my intuition because I liked the concept of having an oracle that only had an image. But I honest to God have not done the work with it. I think I got to the point in the year in like September, October that I was really bogged down with work. So I wasn't journaling the way that I used to. I think that I was primarily just pulling like quick card pulls. And I think if you're going to read intuitively, you really need to sit with the messages. And the best way that I do that is through journaling. So I think that this deck will come back around when I have more time to actually sit down and like stream of consciousness process what I have. Or what I see. So that was Conjure Cards. Okay, next will be JK Tarot, or rather Jupiter King Tarot. This is another one my sweet husband bought me this year. He did very well for me this year, so I'm very thankful for that. This is the revised edition. So Tarot Collectibles had two options. You could either get the revised art collection or the original, and I wanted to get both, but both weren't available when I went to back this, and so I only got the revised edition, but I'm happy that I did because I love the super color saturation. I've seen the other one on other people's channels, and I definitely see the appeal of having the deck be as close as possible to the original. But like I said before, I really love super saturated colors, and so this deck and I have been getting along really well. I've used this primarily with Secrets of the Mystic Grove, and I think that that was one of my favorite deck pairings of this year. But I just love a bright pop of color. Clients really respond well to this too. I did an outdoor market when it was like really hot. I think we were in like the high 90s, and I brought this deck along, and it just seemed to really fit the general atmosphere, because the only other RWS that I had at the time of that market was my Centennial, which is much more like muted in color tone. So I'm happy to have a sort of seasonal RWS for the hotter days. And look at him, he's so cute. I love the Page of Cups. Next is going to be a deck with a similar color palette, and that is my Inner Child deck. Inner Child Cards, I think is what it's called specifically, but it's a tarot. This deck really did teach me this year that a deck will call to you when you need it. So I was sitting down watching YouTube one day, and I had seen this deck again and again and again, and I'd been interested in it, but I never felt motivated to buy it. And then all of a sudden I purchased it, and then 2 days later something happened that really kind of shook me at my core, and it was a very transformative part of the year for me. And I felt like this deck was meant to help me work through some of that childhood stuff that was coming up from that event. So I was very pleased to have this deck at that time. But I think that it's so cool. Like, I love the size of the cards. It really puts you in the mind frame of like you're a kid and everything is like larger than you. But this is a deck that, though I worked with it really intensely when I worked with it, and I was pulling in a lot, I only worked with it for like a small part of the year. And so sometimes when I get it out, I'm like, wait, what is this artwork? I don't think I've ever seen this card before. Because for this deck in particular, I get a lot of repeating cards. I also do a lot of like smaller pulls for this deck. Like, I'll only pull like 3 to 4 at once because they're so big they don't really fit on my table. So it's like a little treat that every time I get this out, like there's another thing for me to look at and another image for me to ascertain and figure out. It's just a sweet little treat. I know I mentioned it before, but I absolutely adore that the wand suit in this deck is butterflies. So let me go ahead and get to it, and we're going to look up here to see if we can find one. There we go. Here we go. So this is 5 of Wands, and it's the little butterflies, and I love butterflies. So this always brings me joy no matter what. So inner child cards, I like this deck a lot. So on the same note, I was also using inner childs with this. So you can kind of tell the size difference. It was kind of clunky in terms of the size, but I think they were a great match. This is the Spread Deck by Holly Nelson. And this is the Shadow Work edition. Let me see if I can get this on. Yeah, there we go. So while I was working through that particularly troubling event, I felt a deep pull to do a lot of shadow work. And so I gravitated towards this deck, using it with the inner childs. And it was a really beautiful thing to hit upon cards such as wounds, things that are really heavy hitters, alongside beautiful fairy tale-esque imagery. I felt like this deck and the inner childs deck definitely are a pair that is kind of inseparable for me. I will use them separately, I guess, so I guess that was a contradiction, but to me, in my mind, they're inseparable. When I think about one, I think of the other, even though I don't always use them together, because it was the perfect mixture of let me really deep dive with you into your emotions, but then also let me support you in a loving, kind, gentle way. So when I've used this deck, I tend to match it with tarot decks that are a little bit more loving and supportive, and that ends up getting really good readings. I've also used this deck with the Gentle Tarot quite a bit, and I found that that was a sweet match as well. You know, decks that are really loving and supportive and want to help you grow, paired with This Is How You Heal, especially if you already have a deep relationship with the tarot deck to begin with, and it's one of the decks that you really trust its readings and trust yourself to interpret it. I think that can be a very powerful match. So this was the Spread Deck by Holly Nelson, and I have the Shadow edition. Next was a bit of splurge buy. I bought this a little bit of a splurge and a little bit impulsively, and I'm thankful I did. This is the Tarot Landscapes, which has a really awful bow. Like, terrible bow. I wish it would just sit straight. But other than my gripe about the cardstock, I love this deck. So I use this deck paired with Under the Oak Tarot. If you want to see that pairing, check out my favorite pairings of 2024, because I talk about that a lot in there. So this is not a deck that I use by itself. It pretty much always has a buddy, but this deck has a voice that's really haunting and very gripping. So I think Shanna D was the person who told me that she uses this as a shadow work deck because essentially it feels like kind of your inner mindscape when you're alone and a little bit lost. It's a little bit desolate in that kind of way. And as soon as she told me that, I was like, ooh, I think I need this deck. I have a lot of nature decks, but a lot of my nature decks are very loving and supportive and caring, and I use them to explore the relationships around me, and it's very deeply spiritual. And I think this is deeply spiritual in a different way. This is a deck that's confronting. So it's less so much about like, look at how you fit in with the rest of the world, and more like, look at you as an individual and what can you do to improve your situation. This is a deck that kind of holds you accountable in that way through its kind of lonesome images. I love this card. Like, what a lot of people don't know about monarchs is that monarchs, they follow the same flight pattern, right? Every single year they follow the same flight pattern, from Mexico all the way up to like the north, it wouldn't be northeast Canada, but like it's like southeast Canada. It's above Maine. I don't have a map in front of me. But what's really cool is that scientists have actually discovered that the monarchs, the way that they conduct their flight pattern actually avoids these mountain ranges that used to exist millions of years ago. So these monarchs still have it coded in their DNA to avoid this particular section of the United States, because in their mind they think that there's still a mountain ridge there. And I think that's really cool that knowledge in regards to like flight paths can be passed down generation to generation to generation, and like they're responding to stimuli in the environment that haven't been around for millions of years. And I think that's just so cool. Like, I really do. So when I think of this as the Two of Wands, it's like, not only are you going on that journey, but you're also carrying all of your ancestral wisdom with you. So I love this card. So Tarot Landscapes, win, win, win in my book. Yes, win. Love it. Knight of Pentacles with the elephant. Come on. Love it. Definitely a hardworking, solid, steady creature. Great memory. I feel like the Knight of Pentacles is someone that has a great memory. Love it. Now here's a deck that I confess I haven't used the way that I want to. This is my Ink Intuition. I had a very accurate reading with this deck. That was not what I wanted to hear. And since then I've been put off a little bit from the deck, but like, I'm thankful for this deck, and I'm thankful for my experiences with it, and I'm thankful for my intuition for giving me a heads up that a situation was about to occur. But essentially I used this deck on the day that I got my tattoo, and my artist made a mistake. This is a little like gross, so if you're a little queasy, like, please fast forward. But she passed over my skin too many times, and I felt very betrayed by that, because essentially what had happened is that the skin layers underneath on several parts of my tattoo kind of like disintegrated, and so I was in a lot of pain for several weeks. And the person who I went to is someone who I deeply trust. Now we're just doing like story time, but it's fine. She mentored with someone who had done some of my other tattoos, and like her reviews were all like 5 stars, and you know, we had great energy when we interacted together. And so it was just very confusing and very like heartbreaking that someone that I thought I could trust with this, because they're like a professional, really, really fucked up my tattoo and fucked up my body in a way that is unacceptable. And when I pull cards from this deck before getting the tattoo, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get a tattoo. How's it gonna go? I pulled from this deck like Knight of Swords and 9 of Wands and 7 of Wands and 7 of Swords, and I'm like, okay, what the fuck? So I probably should have like pulled back a little bit from that point, but I was like, I don't know, maybe it's just me because I'm feeling bad about it. But I woke up like feeling really upset, and so I used this deck because I was like, ooh, Ink Intuition, that'll work. And so I think that this deck in my mind is like associated with a bad memory, so I need to take this bad boy on like a trip and do something else with it, because it's not the deck's fault. Like, thank you actually to this deck. Thank you to my own intuition for giving me some forewarning, so that when I did discover about a week later what had happened, I was prepared for it. But we need to rewrite our memories with it. So I barely talked about the deck at all. I talked about my experiences with it, but hello, story time, that's what I'm known for. So I need another way to use this deck. I did pair it with William Blake Tarot a couple times, and I like that match. So because William Blake is one of my favorite decks, I think I might try that again. But if you have this deck and you love it, let me know. I want to hear you tell me all good things about this deck, because I think I need to kind of rewrite that experience. Because like I said, it's not the deck's fault. I could have used any deck for that and probably gotten the same reading. So anyway, It is mostly healed now. Actually, I would say it's completely healed, but in the parts where the skin broke, we have to go up and get a touch up, and it's all gonna be fine. Nothing is terrible. I'm still very upset about it, but back to more tarot decks. So I will continue. So where are we at now? So we have the Lord of the Rings Tarot. I bought this on the same day that I bought Intuition, which I know better than to do. You buy 2 decks at the same time, there's always going to be one that comes out on top. And unfortunately, this is the one that came up on top. I say unfortunately for Ink Intuition, because I like this one better. But what I'm starting to notice now, and you can probably see it too, is that over the summer I was buying a lot of nature-y decks. And then it hit a point in like September, October, where I was really looking for some like more generic readers because my life was so busy that I wasn't able to go outside the way that I wanted to. And so I was looking for readers that were kind of quick, kind of concise, hence this being a pip deck. I find that pip readings are very quick and they're very concise. And I think that this is the deck that I needed at that time when I was just really busy during the semester with school. But this is a great little deck. We go on tons of little adventures together. So Lord of the Rings Tarot it's a fast favorite. I love this card. So beautiful. And here are the backs. The cardstock is really nice too. I like shuffling it. You know when you get a tarot deck and it's like really, really broken in, like super, super broken in, and you just feel it in the way that it shuffles? This deck feels like it's already broken in, like a nice matte broken, even though I haven't used it enough for it to be like officially broken in. So it's a comfort. Okay. Next is going to be one, thank you, Tarot Magpie for raving about this one, because I definitely bought it because of them. And I know I'm not the only one who said that, because I don't know, Tarot Magpie was really on this deck earlier this year, and they definitely convinced me I needed to get it. So like I said before, I was kind of slipping into a place where I wasn't able to be connected with nature the way that I wanted to be. And so I think that I bought this deck because I wanted something that would connect me to nature, but wasn't as like bright and colorful and in your face like Slavic Legends is, or maybe Mystical Fairies, or some of the other decks that I showed under the oak that are just like bam pops of like in your face. Like, yeah, this has a lot of color, but the artwork itself is mostly pretty simple. And then it also has a question and a keyword, and then it has these black things. So these black borders. So it feels very grounded to me. I also like that I can like look up a little bit more about the animal if I choose. This is the perfect nature deck, I think, for the darker half of the year, because it feels less so like you're working with the actual creature itself, and it feels more like the creatures have gone into hibernation, and because of this black border you are working kind of with their spirit or with their essence or the concept of those creatures. So what a lovely friend. I am so tired of getting this card though. I keep getting this card, and I love Purple Coneflower. We were talking about that earlier with Secrets of the Mystic Grove, but it's like ugh, okay, I guess I'll keep healing. So that was Prairie Majesty. Here are the backs if you want to see them. I like it. I tried to see if this creator had any other decks, like literally just yesterday. I'm like, I want everything this creator made, but I think this is their only oracle. So correct me if I'm wrong, because I couldn't find anything. Next is going to be a deck that I need to use more in the next year, in the coming year. That's going to be my Arthurian Tarot, illustrated by Anatolian. I think the creator is Claire Duval. Yeah, I think that's who it is. I bought this deck because, honest to God, I was just really curious about Anatolian's artwork. The tarot community has always just been such an Anatolian fan, and I see it and I love it and I appreciate it, and I think she is damn good at depicting tarot in a very unique way, but it still makes sense. It's very intuitive. She's coming at it from a very informed perspective, and I think that shows through her illustrations. So I was just, honest to God, very curious. I was like, I need to be a part of this. I want to see what's there. And I had a little extra money because of a bonus, so I didn't mind paying for this to come from France. I ordered it from Amazon France. And I got it in, and I've used it a few times for client readings, and I found that that's really where it shines. It does very well in that atmosphere, but I haven't done a lot of readings for myself yet with this deck. I think the problem is that this deck came in when I was buying a lot of other decks. I just bought too much at once and it just got put to the wayside, but I'm getting a feeling that I think this is going to be a spring deck based off of these color tones. And I am teaching British literature right now. I'll probably be teaching British literature for the unforeseeable future. I really like teaching British literature. So we'll circle back around to the Arthurian legends again in the fall when I get my new batch of seniors. So I think this deck's gonna have its time. I'm looking forward to getting to know it. It's kind of like a book that's on your to be read shelf, but you're really looking forward to it. That's this deck for me. And gorgeous backs. Next is gonna be one that has gotten a lot of use already, and that's going to be my Jade Oracle. The guidebook says that this is a deck of ancient Mexican deities and symbols, or actually ancient symbols and deities of ancient Mexico. I feel like that makes more sense. And I use this with my Aztec Tarot quite a lot. This is a deck that is a really trusted companion. I use this with the Aztec Tarot, but I also pull these a lot for altar cards. I like having this deck, and then I recently just got in the illuminated deck of Holy Souls. That's going to be the last deck that I show in this video. And I like having some form of deity on my altar, though I don't necessarily say that I do deity work per se. It's nice to have them there as like a symbolic kind of message and an energy that I can look for in the everyday. So for example, the man covered in boils. So I remember getting this card recently, and essentially this man was wanting to offer a sacrifice to some of the other higher gods, but all he had on his skin were boils. And so he like scraped the boils off of his skin and offered them to the gods, and then the gods were accepting of that because it's what he had to offer. So he's definitely known as like a humble god or a humble deity. And I remember thinking to myself that like it was like the last week of school and I was very tired and I was very burnt out, and it was like, look, I said, you give what you give your best, and that has to be enough. And I really appreciated working with him during that time period, because I think that this was the time in which I needed to receive that message. So I'm not like venerating, I would say, but more just like, what can I learn from this, from like a legends perspective, but also a place of reverence for this is a different set of points of views, and I definitely want to give them their opportunity to shine, and I want the messages to have really time to sink. So this is kind of like a slow dive for me. So that was the Jade Oracle. Next is my little friend. I'm gonna hold him up because he's a little smaller. Next is my little friend. This is Tarot of the Dead. I like this deck. I like this deck a lot. I like pip decks. We've already kind of established that. This is a nice little friend to take on adventures. I didn't use him as much as I wanted to, but I think, like I said, I just had a lot coming out once, and I only got this deck in like November. So we're still early on in our relationship with each other. But it's just such a happy little deck, guys. I love how the skeletons are all just like a little bit sassy. Like, I mean, here's the devil. Of course the devil's going to be sassy. But like, they look just cheeky. This is one of the extra cards, but I kept it in here because I just thought it was so beautiful. The Empress here, she's kind of kneeling down. Let me see if I can find some really cheeky skeletons for you, because I know they're in here. I'm getting a lot of majors. Here we go, like the Strength. Come on, look at that. I love this card. Oh, I love this card. I love this card so much. All right. Where's a cheeky one? Here's another extra card. Okay, here we go, the Emperor. Come on, I would follow him as my boss. He seems to know what's up. I love him. I love him. He's a little businessman. It's a sweet deck. So that was my Tarot of the Dead. Here are the backs. It has this nice gilding too. It's a sweet little deck. I think I'm in the US, so I didn't have to pay an exorbitant amount for shipping, especially because it was coming from Texas and I live in Louisiana. But I think I paid like $35 for this deck. So cute little indie. I'm a fan of affordable indie decks. I need to do a video where I share my affordable indie decks and like my favorite ones. I think I'm going to do that. I need to add that to the filming list. Okay, next. All right, next is going to be another very cherished favorite, and that is going to be my Divining Poets, Lucille Clifton. If you follow me on Instagram, you probably see me post this a lot because I've been pulling from it almost every single day since I bought it. So Lucille Clifton is or was an American poet, an African American poet. And when I studied her in college, I really focused a lot on like her body positivity because she had a lot of poems about like her body and how her body is like something that has like constantly been her companion. It's very body present poetry. And so I bought this deck thinking that some of the lines from her works would feature that, but it's actually way more expansive than that. And so this is one of the lines from one of her poems, words tumbling together up the long stair, home. And all I imagine is like this haunting image of like this group of people walking up the stairs and their words are tumbling because they've had like a nice night out. And then they go up the long stairs, comma, home. Beautiful. Even when I am dancing now, I am dancing myself onto the tongue of heaven. You are like me, understanding the surprise. What you pawn, I will redeem. Come home from the show, don't be a show. I get this one quite often. So I use these in my Tarot Advent folders, Tarot Advent hosted by like Kelly Bear. And I was pulling like one of these every day through that process. And it was just uncanny how spot on these messages were. So I've been pulling these every day. This has been a daily draw deck for me. I rise up above myself like a fish flying. It's just because like we're taking like isolated bits of the poetry, it's really brought down to its most profound element. It is the life thing in us that will not let us die. Beautiful. So I like it. If you're interested in this, I thought it was very affordable and very good and one of my favorite buys ever. I'm going to hold this one up too because it's a round deck. This is my Tarot of the Cloisters, purchased for me by my best friend ever because we both love stained glass. She got this print even though it's out of copy. She got this deck even though it's out of print on eBay for like a really good price. And it's sweet. I haven't done as much work with it as I want, but like I said, hence I had a lot of stuff come in that was new. So I think it's just a matter of time. I really like the color palette on this. It reminds me a lot of spring, and strangely enough, this deck reminds me a lot of the Goddess Tarot. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that one. That one definitely is in my part 1 of my tarot collection video. I'm going to leave link down below, and it should be pretty early on it too. But I think it's because it's an older, both are older US games decks, and they both use like the same kind of blue color palette. There's something about these soft blues that remind me a lot of spring. These soft purples, these pastels. So I think this deck's time is coming. And I've used it a few times and found that the readings were really spot on. I think that I'm just a little averse to the circles. They drive me bonkers. And I know that you can use the directionality in readings. So I have to just sit down and use the directionality and the readings the way that is intentional and intended. Maybe look up some resources on how to do that. Because it should be one of the deck's strengths that it's round, because I'm able to bring that extra layer of interpretation in. I just haven't done that yet. So this is Tarot of the Cloisters. Here's the back. This one is out of print, but she got it on eBay for a good price. Okay, if you want to hear me gush about a deck, this is going to be the one. Go watch my Archetypes walkthrough if you're interested in this one. I call it a walkthrough. It was really a first impressions. But it was long enough to be a walkthrough because I had a lot of shit to say about this deck. I love this deck. This is my Archetypes Tarot. And this deck meets me at my soul. So spoiler alert, this definitely is going to feature in my Gemini, not Gemini. I said Gemini because it says Gemini there. In my January decks video. because I want to use this in January. I want to use it in February. I want to use it in March. I want to use it in April. I want to use this deck like every week. Right now, we are having a beautiful love affair together. And hopefully the love affair will last longer and it won't just be an affair. It'll be more like a marriage, because I definitely foresee when I make my update to my top 10 decks list, I definitely foresee this one being on that list. I don't know how high yet, but I think it'll be there. And one of the reasons is because all of the minors are panoramic. So let me go ahead and show you what I mean. I'm going to pause so I can get the cards. Okay, so this is the Seven of Pentacles and the Eight of Pentacles, and you can actually see here that the cards match up right there. So you can see that the part of the tree is right here. So it's really cool to work with this deck because you look at not only what is pictured in the Eight of Pentacles, but the Seven of Pentacles. And so when you look at it from this context, you're really able to understand the journey of the Fool and how we've done all of this hard work with like planting these plants and waiting for them to ripen, and some of them are ready but some aren't. And then from that we can reap the benefits and build this beautiful garden from all of our hard work. So it shows that there's a little bit more of like a mess and a little bit of waiting, and then eventually through your efforts you're able to get that cultivated image. It makes my brain happy, y'all. This deck makes me happy. It makes my brain happy. If you're interested in seeing this, please go watch my first impressions. I gush and gush and gush about this deck. The comments on that video also were really interesting. People were sharing their interpretations with me. It was one of my favorite videos that I made in the last like few months. So Archetypes Tarot, what a friend. Here are the sides, and then there are the backs too. I like the clean, simple backs, very pretty. Okay, we're almost done actually. We're tracking along. Next deck is going to be my Yellow Box RWS, and let me see when this was printed. It actually has the date on it. Hold up. 1971. So to give you a little bit of a story about this deck, the day that I went to go get my tattoo, my little traumatic experience that I shared earlier, I won't even mock myself, it was kind of traumatic. So we went, my best friend and I went into a antique store. And I thought to myself, oh my God, if there's going to be an antique store that has a tarot deck, it's going to be this antique store. And as soon as I was checking out, I looked at my friend and I lamented the fact that they didn't have any. And as I'm looking at her, I see something yellow catch my eye, because the box is this yellow, like you're going to notice it. And underneath the counter where we're checking out was this tarot deck. And I remember the experience of literally just shaking with excitement when I found it, because I was like, oh my God, it's a vintage RWS. Like, do I need another RWS? Probably not, but it's coming home with me. And I counted all the cards, all 78 were there. It was just such a beautiful experience. And I'm happy that I own this one, because this now has become my personal use RWS. I keep this on my altar at all times, along with Tarot Botanical, which was my first deck, and Story Through Stones, which is my ancestor work oracle. I really should show y'all like my altar setup one day and the decks that I have there and why. I think that might be a video I need to add to my film list too. And whenever I need like a deep but like trusted, concise answer, this is the deck that I've been going to. I love the rich colors. I started off with a Centennial, and I still like the Centennial, but I have since bumped that to being only for clients. And I've really just been getting along well with this one for personal use. So I know everybody's seen it before, but I thought it was cool. I mean, if you saw a tarot deck in a antique store, I bet y'all would probably buy it too. All right, we're on my last few decks. Not very many left at all. So one of the more recent decks that I got in is my Medieval Oracle of the Beast. And I will take a second to show you the guidebook on this one, because I think it's worth it. So, let me see if I can get it over here. Does that fit in frame? Let me see. So it has this beautiful like embossed book that comes with it, with like a ribbon. We love a ribbon. It has like these gilded edges here. And then let me open up to an entry. We have like full color illustration of the card, the keywords, the write-up, and the affirmation. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. So one of my forever love decks is Serpent and Peacock, the first edition. And so I really like what Libra Moon puts out. Sometimes in practice, the decks don't work for me as well as I hope that they would. But I think that when it comes down to it, I'm really attracted to the aesthetics and the production quality, and just in general, I really love historical decks. So I thought to myself I was going to go ahead and give this a shot because I get along very well with Serpent and Peacock. So I was like, maybe this is my next Libra Moon deck, which is the Creator. And I got it in and I was like, I really like this bad boy, like a lot. I love how we have like this shininess here. It's a very good reader for fall. I can't really say much more about it other than that because I have done a playing with pairs with this deck, which I can leave in the description box below. But I haven't really used it in practice as much as I would want to. I think my time has been like definitely, if I look next to me, my time has definitely been occupied by Archetypes deck, the Lucille Clifton Oracle, and probably Prairie Majesty and Lord of the Rings. So I got a lot of like new exciting things in at the end of the year, but I know that this one's coming and I have it on my shelf to pull from for January. We just have to get to it. I like it. So if you have this deck, tell me what you pair it with. I'd like to hear. This is another one that's like on my kind of like to be read list, right? You see the book, you see the deck, and you're like, oh, I can't wait to work with it. I'm still very like excited about it, even though we haven't had very much play. And it's so big. Look at that. It's so big, so chunky. Okay, so that was Medieval Oracle of the Beast. Next deck a viewer sent me, which I really loved, and that's going to be my Symbolic Soul Tarot. I have edged it in black, which is how I think it should come. I love a deck that's edged in black. So this is a deck that makes me really happy. It reminds me a lot of Dream Enchantress, which was that blue deck that I showed earlier, because we're kind of existing in like this kind of alien-esque world. This is a really lovely reader for, I find like this darker half of the year is when I've been using it, because it's nice to have a deck that I can pull out at night when the sky is getting dark at like 4:30, 5 o'clock p.m. But yet we still have like this nice touch of this gold to remind you that like light is about to enter your world. So that's where it's been fitting. I have used this a lot for daily pulls since getting it in. It has one of my favorite cardstocks. It's like this nice like matte that's just really easy to overhand shuffle. The cards are like the appropriate thickness. They have a good core. I really like the production quality of this deck in particular. But we've been getting some like interesting like kind of moody, mysterious readings with it. It has a bit of like a sexual overtone, or undertone, which I think is really interesting. Like I can't help but not see the sexuality in these cards. And like, I don't know, like I see like a lot of phallic imagery when I'm reading with them. Like, I don't know, there's something about his cape. I mean, there you go. I know I've talked about it in other like videos before, but it's giving phallic, and I don't mind that like at all. I don't have a deck other than like my La Femme Erratique, which is like overtly like it's essentially photography of naked women. I don't have a deck other than that kind of has like a sexual undertone to me, and maybe it's me, maybe it's what I'm bringing to the deck, but it's definitely what I see, and it's definitely something that I've been enjoying leaning into. So I think that this is kind of like filled a slot in my collection that I didn't even know that I was looking for a deck for, and that's kind of exciting, and that's like the reason we buy decks, right? And so it kind of makes me feel like I should go to my best friend and give her my tarot wish list and tell her like, go pick a deck for me. Or even like my husband, because I think people buy decks for you that you wouldn't naturally buy for yourself, and then you get them in and you're like, holy shit, like I needed this point of view in my collection. I needed a deck that brought these ideas forth. So it really feels like it kind of rounded out my collection in a way I didn't think it needed to be rounded. So it's cute. I love it. It's my weird little alien deck. I don't know, it's cool. So that was Symbolic Soul. Thank you again to the person who gifted it to me. You know who you are. I really appreciate you. And so on the same vein of kind of weirdness, because I love a good weird deck, it is going to be my Land of the Giants Oracle. I saw this on Krista Chronicles the first time, and I kept thinking about it, and then thinking about it, and then thinking about it, and then thinking about it, and I finally decided to jump on it. So Land of the Giants Oracle follows these little creatures as they are entering into this abandoned home and kind of like getting into all this kind of shit that the humans left behind in this manor. And I find that to be really, really cool. It kind of reminds me a little bit of that new deck from Three Trees Tarot. I want to get it, but it's just a little bit pricey with the taxes that I have to pay, that like the shipping fees. And the Heartwood Tarot, is that what it's called? It kind of gives me that same vibe. So I think that this deck is kind of like scratching that itch for now. But I'm obsessed with the concept of like little creatures and like this big world and what can we learn from them. The keywords are really interesting on this one as well. Like I've never heard of like forget me not. They have like a mixture of like keywords and then also titles. So some of the stuff you have to go in the guidebook for like the Green Forge, but like I could really look at this and not go in the guidebook for it. Like when I'm looking at this image, if we're talking about the Green Forge, we could be talking about nature's ability to forge things no matter how desolate the circumstances are, right? Because we're talking about the Green Forge, so we're talking about nature. And so this guy looks like he's part of nature and he's ripping and he's creating with like these new divisions of earth. It almost reminds me of like perennial roots of like perennial plants being like ripped and divided. So I mean, I can still get a message. Like I don't need the guidebook for it. I feel like the artwork kind of speaks for itself. Lady Silk, how cool is she? So I've been playing with this one. I did put her up, but before I put her up, I was using her a lot with Witch Sisters Tarot. If you have this deck in Witch Sisters Tarot, the color palettes look really good together. I showed that in a video, but I can't remember which one that I showed it in. So I'm sorry, I can't remember. But just take my word for it. Like this deck, the colors, like the same as Witch Sisters. They look really good. With the exception of like these bright ass like greens. I think that's kind of weird that they're in the deck, but nah. The other more pastel colors really work. I think I've showed you the whole deck. I might as well just keep flipping because I'm already here, right? Halls of the Dead, I like this one. So near yet so far. Done. Okay, that was Land of the Giants Oracle. All right, next. We have another deck my dear best friend got me. So I was gifted a lot of decks this year. It was a very good year for that. Oh, I'm struggling to open out this bag. Sorry, it's taking me a while. Okay. And that is the Broken Mirror Tarot. I listed this in my Tarot Award to 2024 as my most glamorous deck. Look at that shine. She's pretty. This is the Emerald Edition, Broken Mirror Tarot. Here are the backs. We love a good back. This cardstock is everything I ever wanted in cardstock. I literally squealed when I opened up the deck next to my best friend, and she was like, "Oh, you like it?" And she's an artist, so she thought I was like talking about the artwork, which I do like. But because I'm a tarot reader as well as an appreciator of art, I squealed over the cardstock. The cardstock is what made me really happy. So I love this deck. It makes sense in my mind. I really want to film like a first impressions of it because I haven't used it very much at all. So it still feels like very new and kind of still in that like first impressions land. Because I just got this, I think, like 2 weeks ago. But the scale is really weird in this deck. So for example, let's see. We have the Four of Cups and this guy is like so tiny right here, but like I like that we have like a weeping willow back here as well to demonstrate like his sadness and how upset he is and how withdrawn he is and things like that. Also, weeping willows always remind me of like women crying over lost love. So maybe this guy is like upset because he's lost his love, something like that. But I like that the perspective is weird because like this tree is like really small and this guy's like really big, which like shows that his sadness is like an undertone, and like he feels like it's kind of consuming all of him in a way. It's cool. It's different. It's unique. This is the Chariot. I love it. And I feel so blessed to have a friend of mine that knows that I love tarot, knows that I love stained glass, and bought me not one, but 2 stained glass tarots. How sweet is that? The 3 of Swords. I love that it's like going through him. Right? Like that's really cool. It's going through him. In terms of the experience, like he's not going through it, it's going through him. It's pretty. So I don't have much more to say about it because it's new, but first impressions might be on my filming list. Guys, we are down to the last 2. All right, let's see. So this is the 78 Doors Tarot, or Tarot of the 78 Doors. Let's look. Tarot of the 78 Doors. So I'm going to hold this one up while I talk about it. I like this deck. I used this deck for a client the other day, and it absolutely sang for me. As you can tell from even this video, or if you've seen my other collection videos too, or if you've been around my channel, I don't have a lot of decks that feature humans. Like I feel like the Tarot Arthurian was like the closest one that I've shown in this video that showed like a lot of humans. So like it's really weird for me to have a deck that's extremely like people-y heavy. But it really worked. Like my client was asking me some pretty specific questions about his love life. And then when I pulled from this deck, I felt like I was picturing them for myself based on some of the characteristics of the people that I saw in this deck. And that was really cool. Like I think I spend a lot of time in like the nature decks land, or like the really weird decks, such as like William Blake. It has people in it, but it's like really weird. Or like Wild Radiance or Dream Enchantress. Like I have a lot of like weird decks. So it was kind of nice to be able to offer some more tangible like images to show my client, to help him understand where I was coming from and where I was getting my intuitive hits from. So it was cool. I will tell you wholeheartedly, I went into a metaphysical shop with my friend. I wanted to buy a deck. I had seen a couple walkthroughs of this, but like not a lot. And I was like, screw it. I'm gonna buy it. I brought it home and I was like, whoa, this is definitely not my usual. But I vibe this. Like I really do. So I think I'm gonna keep using it for clients and see where we get there. I appreciate the doors. I brought the doors into the reading when I was reading for my client, seeing where they are, seeing if they're locked, seeing if they're open, things like that. I mean, it's called the 78 Doors for a reason. So cool. I like this deck. It's cool. It's very cool. I think out of all of the ones that I've shown, like these last few, I have used the Symbolic Soul a lot, but I think this is the one that I've used the second most out of like these last like 5. Okay, here's my glitzy one. So I labeled Broken Mirror as my most glamorous deck, and I think that this next one gives it a run for its money. If you want to see this deck in more detail, I have a silent flip through of it. And it is my deck, my Illuminated Deck of Holy Souls by Lindsay Williams. The next deck that I'm going to be getting in, and it's the only deck that I have on pre-order or that I'm waiting for, is my Desert Illuminations. But when I saw this was out on pre-order, I missed out on Desert Illuminations the first go round. And I made the decision that I was not ever going to miss out on anything Lindsay Williams ever created ever again. So that was my justification for buying this. I grew up Catholic. I am actually a confirmed Catholic, though I don't practice Catholicism anymore. And so I'm used to being around the world of saints. And so I also am living in a place that is deeply saint heavy. And a lot of the like local witchcraft traditions are based in Catholicism and saints, with a mixture of like voodooism as well. And so I felt that it was important for me to get this deck because it is definitely representative of not only my heritage, but also the place where I live. So in the guidebook, she gives a little QR code. So she does have like, and I'm going to show y'all in here because I feel like this is such a new deck. People haven't talked about it. And it was like very limited print run. Like I think it was like only 100 or 150. So she has a little QR code where she gives you a write-up for each of the cards. And then in the actual packet itself, she gives you like these keywords. So you can tell what all of these individuals are saints of. I really haven't been using the guidebook with it. I've actually just been pulling it and reading the little quotes underneath. So Saint Martha, help me to offer gifts of hospitality, love, and service to others, sharing the bread of kindness and compassion that all I do. I like that. I can work with that. So offer the gifts of hospitality. So if I were to pull this card, that would be my focus of gifts of hospitality. So I think that there's enough written on each card. So inspire me with your spirit of forgiveness and resilience, guiding me towards peace and freedom. I can deep dive into who this particular saint is, but like I said, I would focus on spirit of forgiveness, and then also resilience, and how like if we forgive, we innately become more resilient. And I love this because I live near a landmark that is Saint Martin de Porres, kind of like I live kind of close enough. And it's really cool to me because when we pulled out this deck, my husband was like, oh, hey, I didn't realize that was a saint. So it was cool. So I'm seeing like a lot of connections too to my local community. I never would have picked up one. So this is my most recent deck. The only deck I'm waiting for is Desert Illuminations to come in, but y'all have all seen that one at this point. So I was like, you know what, damn it, I'm gonna film my video. And that's the end. So this was the 37 decks that have come in my collection since my first tarot collection video. That one is still up to date because I showed the decks in that video in the order that I got them. I keep pretty meticulous records and I don't really re-gift decks at all. So I think that that's still a very accurate display of my collection. Y'all don't judge me if the film quality is bad. That was like literally like the 7th video I ever posted. Or maybe like the 10th. Like it was still very early on. I've learned a lot since then. But if y'all want to see my entire collection, it'll be split between that video and this video. And I've just decided that periodically, maybe once every 6 months, I'll do an update in this and then just keep it all linked in one playlist. So I hope that y'all have a wonderful day. Thank you for hanging out with me. I really appreciate y'all being here, and every like, every comment, every subscribe means everything to me. So I appreciate being able to be in this community with you. So thank y'all so much and see you next time.